So we're getting to that time of year when we start thinking about our planning for the next year, so for 2026, across all of our sort of media mix and with our partners and clients. And I think that one of the areas that we're particularly interested in and looking forward to for 2026 is social, paid and organic social. And I think how those are going to work together and some of the changes that are coming in, some of the new sort of opportunities and challenges that we and our partners are going to be facing. I know it's something that we've been talking about a lot. What are you thinking about in the moment? Like what are you getting asked by clients? What are your sort
Yeah.
of biggest watch outs or predictions for
Yeah, so I think
2026?
for me, what I'm most excited about with social is this idea of the attention economy. And, we've gone through, advertising for so long. It's always been focused on reach and frequency and, very kind of binary numbers. But what really interests me at the moment is how we can start utilizing social and getting people to, pay attention to content and pay attention to brands.
Yes.
And I think what we're seeing from a lot of clients is they're becoming a lot more sophisticated about that.
Yeah.
And, it used to be that clients would almost think about social and just compare it to TV. However, I feel like now they're starting to think about it as its own standalone media channel and actually
Yeah.
not just going, right, it can provide us reach and frequency, but actually how can we start to engage people, get them to watch content longer and, really tap into those interests from people.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it's viewed now, which is absolutely true, as its own sort of ecosystem and a place where you can have complete conversations
Yeah,
and end-to-end journeys
yeah,
from your audiences and from your
yeah.
customers. I guess the flip side of that is that as businesses are understanding the role of social in a more and more sophisticated way, the expectations are also increasing as well.
Hmm.
So how can you prove the value of it? How
Yeah,
can it wash its own face?
yeah,
All the expectations that channels like paid search have
mm,
had the burden of for years. It feels
yeah,
like that's sort of coming alongside the opportunity.
yeah.
Do you think what sort of questions or challenges have you been getting from clients in that kind of area of how do we prove the value of it?
Yeah, I think ongoing there is always that question about measurement, right? I think in every video that I do for Jaywing, I talk about my favorite quote, which is, I know that half of my advertising works, but I don't know which half.
Yes.
So I think, I think it's true of social that people are starting to take the ROI on it a lot more seriously. It
Yeah.
used to be, oh, some people like this stuff, great, that means it's
Yeah.
working. But actually, how do we think about that and, invest in measurement the same way we would do some of those more traditional channels as well?
Yeah.
So for me, it's absolutely looking at things like attribution, but then also longer term, bringing that into things like MMMs and making sure we're taking it seriously as a media channel and therefore taking the measurement of it seriously as well.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense. And I think one of the difficult things with social is always that you want it to ladder up to some sort of source of truth. So some measure of how it works in the overall media mix.
Yeah.
But you still want some measure that's specific to the platform and that
Hmm.
talks to the individual kinds of
Yeah.
engagement and the measures of success that are relevant
Yeah.
in a social environment.
Yeah, and I think things like, view through rates, all of those kind of things are really great things for us to be able to be looking at in platform. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about, that attention bit.
Yeah.
How can we value it just beyond, an impression and actually think, not all impressions are equal. So how do we start to define which ones are the ones that are worth more to us? So I think it's partly that. And, definitely something when we talk to our FMCG clients that maybe you can't buy or click to buy straight away. And then for some of our other, clients that might be more into kind of a lead generation category or e-com, really thinking about how we tie those journeys together. So working with our data science team to actually understand once they go off platform, how do we then tie that person back, whether that's using something like Salesforce or it's tracking, making sure we're kind of thinking about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting what you're saying about attention. And I think that the opportunity and the challenge with attention at the moment on social media is just the increasing nuance or complexity of the context in which your content or your
Yep.
adverts or your messaging can
Yeah.
appear and all
Yeah.
the different kind of formats and inventory and
Yeah.
brand safety is always a
Yep.
concern in a sort of post-Twitter
Yep.
X world.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that's on clients' minds is sort of in equal measure, how can they best take advantage
Mm.
of all of that new media space that's
Yep.
available in social channels, and how can they navigate it in a way that's
Yeah.
going to not be to their detriment or introduce new
Yeah,
risk?
and I think for me, when brands started investing in social, one of the really big things was that you almost are competing with other brands, yeah, but you're actually competing with people's friends. You have to be more
Exactly.
interesting than a cat video, which
Yes.
is really hard to do.
Yeah. Particularly with
So,
smart cats. But
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So I think for me, it's about making sure that you really understand your audience, you really understand what that sweet spot is of what your audience are interested in, but as you as a brand, what is your remit to be able to talk about those things?
Yeah.
Because we know that people are interested in cats, for example, but is your brand got the ability to be authoritative to talk about cats?
Yes.
So for me, it's setting that up and having a really strong strategy at the beginning that looks at actually what do we understand about our audience, but actually internally, what do we understand about our brand? And then overlaying, looking at competitors and going, what's that space that we can play in, and making sure that's set out up front. So I think for me, that's a way that we can kind of navigate how we take advantage of all of those things.
Yes.
And then I think brand safety is, is always top of mind for any channel we work in. And I would say that I think that probably socials had a bit of a bad rep for it. But,
Yes.
there was a time, when no one would invest in display, for example,
Absolutely.
because you were worried about where your ads might be appearing.
Yes.
So I think it's about having a partnership with an agency that's got good partnerships with people like Google and Meta to make sure that
Yeah.
we can be super on top of what that inventory is and making sure we're not appearing against something that maybe the brand wouldn't be happy with.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think that one of the things that's really important, a really important part of that sometimes is easy to sort of overlook is the mechanics. So how are you going to put that strategy into practice? And I think having the right sort of experts and teams in place who can go into those platforms and make sure that that messaging is going to be appearing in the right place at the right time and in the right way within the right context is going to be really key to sort of being successful in social in the coming year.
All right.
Hi, Ray. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Well,
Oh, brilliant. One of the things that we've been talking about a little bit when we're looking at what our predictions are for social in 2026 is this idea that I think has actually been around for a while, but it's becoming more and more important, which is sort of social media playing a role as more than just another display channel, as something that is an opportunity to have a sort of richer engagement or I suppose a deeper connection with our audiences and sort of be a more attentive space, if that makes sense. Is that something that you've been discussing with sort of colleagues and partners and clients, or is there anything in that kind of area that jumps out as you that you think will be kind of a departure in 2026?
yeah, absolutely. I think we have conversations like this with clients all the time, but more frequently now than ever before. I think we're at a really interesting time for social because it's getting more investment than it's ever had, but it's also getting more eyeballs from a senior perspective.
Yes.
And I think one thing that clients are always looking to do is work out how they can combine their paid and organic strategies to create a more integrated experience for users. So I think one of the things that's really interesting is you've got lots and lots of siloed teams working to their own individual goals on both client and agency side, right? So over here, you've got your organic teams, and we're very much thinking about content and engagement and generating laughs and smiles and humor and likes and comments and shares. And on this side, you've got your paid teams, right, who are thinking about commercials, they're thinking about ROAS, they're thinking about efficiencies, and that's mirrored on our client side as well.
Yep.
I think what you've got to remember is that outside of our agency and marketing land, there is an end user that's just consuming branded content, right? Whether it's an organic post or a paid ad.
Right.
And I think in order to really be planning effectively for those users, we have to be thinking about who they are at a starting point, and we have to be planning collectively, right? From our comms right down to our conversion.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that it's important to remember, right, that the sort of splits that we have in sort of agency land and in our marketing industry between paid social, organic social, those silos don't exist to the consumer or the end user. And really, they're just seeing content from a brand, and it's not really the distinction between whether that's been served through organic inventory or paid inventory doesn't really mean anything to them. And it's in a really noisy environment as well, right? So there's all this other sort of competing content and messaging going on. I think that's often something that we get asked about, right? Is sort of how can you, brands understand that they want to have that joined up journey and use social to have those kind of connections with their audience. What are some of the things that you think the brands should be doing to sort of have that bridge between their, let's say, paid advertising on social and their organic pages?
We need to be the connective tissue, I think, between those three pieces of information. So comms, organic and paid.
Yes.
And then I think really what properly kind of forward thinking social kind of first, I guess, campaign planning looks like is a funnel view that combines all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So it's about kind of bringing in the right kind of content and creative specialists to activate whatever kind of messaging it is in the top of the funnel in a way that's going to generate efficient awareness,
Yeah.
but making sure we've got a really clear and kind of laser sharp path to purchase mapped out through paid specialists who are more kind of, you know, specialized in the inventory, in the metrics, in the reporting, that kind of thing. I think that's the foundation.
Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. It is interesting what you're saying about sort of mapping out that journey that a user's going on through their shopper journey or buyer journey or customer journey, whatever we'd call it. And I think that something that I see working really well with our teams is when there are shared objectives, shared business objectives. So when paid and organic sort of efforts are going towards an overarching vision of where the brand wants to be, or a commercial business sort of direction, that really helps tie all of that together and make sure that everything's really purposeful and intentful.
I think that's so key as well. And I think a conversation that we're having all the time with clients currently is starting to get really nuanced in terms of how they understand the success of different types of advertising, especially when it comes to organic social. So we will have clients where we have BAU content work streams, and the function of that content is really to keep our core and most loyal fans engaged. It's to give them something that they'll keep coming back to, that's recognizable, it's entertaining in the right way, it's useful. But as we increasingly get more sophisticated with the kinds of content that we're putting on there, or as we lean into more kind of brand and campaign messaging on organic, we need to start talking to clients about different metrics of success. So for example, you know, when we're thinking about how we might support a client's above the line advertising through social, we might not be expecting to do the same level of engagement numbers that we would in the same types of posts we're putting out every week, right? But there's higher value to that. And I think it's about really understanding how that plays into the wider comms mix, and also treating it a little bit more like we treat other brand channels from a measurement perspective. So thinking about things like ad recall, thinking about things like awareness and consideration, thinking about things like proper brand tracking, but through the lens of organic and paid social content.
Absolutely. And another thing that we sort of talk about a lot, or that comes up a lot in meetings, is one of the nice things about paid social is that you can reach quite clearly defined audiences. And one of the bad things about paid social is you have to pay to do it. And we've had some good success where we've been able to sort of go after those audiences originally through a paid strategy, but then retain them and sort of build a community on social. And I feel like that's a thing that's been around in social for so long, is the idea of how can you build a community, and everyone agrees it's a good thing. But I know that we've had some good sort of examples of where we've been able to really achieve that in a way that feels sort of meaningful and I guess sticky. What are some of the things, they're probably not easy to say in like a 30-second snippet, but what are some of the things that you guys are doing to be able to retain those audiences as communities?
And I think, not to sound really weird, but I think the two things that you said that really jumped out at me there were meaningful and sticky. Because I think a lot of brands want bigger social audiences. But they want sticky social audiences, right, at the end of the day. So it's a really interesting one for us where we're working with the people that are on the tools of the channels, and they're getting remits from, you know, senior stakeholders, CMOs. We want to see our community size growing. We want to see more followers. We want to see bigger communities. And then our question to that has always been, but why? You know, what are those people sticking around to do, and who are the people that you want? And how can you understand the actual value of that community? It absolutely used to be the case that, you know, you plugged loads of money into follower campaigns, you'd get loads of followers, your content would reach 50-60% of your audience. We know now it's absolutely a pay-to-play game, right? So we're starting to try and evolve our conversations where we're looking at organic to really understand the meaning of what following means, right? So we're looking at average organic reach per post. We're looking at how our content is being engaged with. Is it the same kinds of demographics that are engaging with our content, and does that align with who we're looking at from a wider brand strategy perspective? So that's really the foundation of those conversations. And then really it's about taking all those metrics and all those data points and creating content that's going to generate the stickiest audiences, right? So it's not just about going after what I used to call magpies, right? Who are people that just show up to enter the free prize giveaways on social and then disappear for the next 6 months. It's about serving them relevant, useful, engaging content, hooking their eye with paid, and then keeping on delivering kind of content on your organic feeds that is true to that vision, right? So that they're continually being served something. And I think as we move to feeds that are more discovery focused, that are more search focused, but also things like Meta introducing family and friends feeds, brands need to be thinking about value more than anything else for consumers.
Yeah, no, yeah, makes complete sense. And one of the things that we were talking about with Becca before was this sort of challenge and this opportunity in attention in social media. And I think that it's on everyone's mind, right? Like the access to I won't say good creative, but like bold creative through some of these tools, and often good creative. The sort of the barrier to entry has never been lower, and there's so much high production, high quality content that you're bombarded with now when you log onto social platforms. But obviously that's not all there is to sort of cutting through and to let's say stopping people from scrolling. One of the things that we've been speaking about a lot that I know we're going to talk about in a bit more detail later, which I'm looking forward to, is this idea of how important attention is on social, and how much of a challenge that's going to become in the context of sort of the new access that everybody has to really powerful creative tools. But I think that that's something that we'll sort of get into later on in the day.
Yeah.
Hey, Alice.
Hi.
Yeah.
So I think we're having a conversation today about winning the auction and how kind of paid social is getting very sort of competitive and the social landscape is really crowded. So how do you find that, is the best way to stand out in terms of it from a creative perspective?
Yeah, I think for me it's always like have something to say, and something to say that your audience wants to hear. So that's the magic there, to find out what's that, and just turn up and give it to them. And I think then you'll get their attention, their interactions, and
that's it.
Yeah.
Attention is such a difficult metric to measure, but it's also one of the most important things across social. We know that feeds are super busy, and everyone's there to kind of be entertained, and everyone has a different purpose on each platform as well. I think one of the things that we are really trying to encourage all clients to think about is what kind of tone of voice are you going to have across each of your platform, because you'll have a different audience on TikTok as you will across Meta, and kind of how you create your creatives based around that and what kind of each platform gives you.
Yeah, that's really, really important, because, the way that you show up, it might be different for each platform, or you don't have to show up in all platforms. You might just want to dedicate yourself into one only, because that's where your audience is, and that could happen, and it happens to various brands. So yeah, I think to treat the social media platforms as a one blanket sort of approach is not something that you should do, so you really need to have the nuances of understanding your audience. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, and I think understanding their motivators as well.
Yeah.
I think from a paid perspective as well, when we're trying to compete against such a busy market, being able to hone in on what is our audience trying to get out of, why would they buy this product, or, what is their barrier or their motivation to want that and need that, and addressing that in such a short period of time, what is it, a couple of seconds that you get of grabbing someone's attention, and really hitting home with that message. And again, having that difference across each platform is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really saturated market, and you really need to kind of show up and interest people right away in the first 2 seconds almost. So it's tough, but it can be done if you understand your audience and you understand the platforms that you're showing up to.
Definitely. And I think sort of winning in the auction as well is creative is obviously the biggest part of it, but there's so many other factors as well that kind of go into that. It's not just about having the kind of highest bid anymore. It's all about ad quality and expected sort of engagement rates that you're going to get off of that, and kind of user value and things like that really impact kind of what success you're going to have in those markets. And we know that across all these platforms, algorithm changes are happening all the time, and kind of black box text is more prevalent than ever. So understanding what levers we can pull to kind of achieve sort of the most success in auctions is so important. And I think the way we found that's most successful for that for kind of a range of clients is testing and A/B testing. I think it's so important that we A/B test not only just creative iterations, but also landing page iterations, for example, and making sure that we've got that kind of complete user journey, so that whatever creative someone might see, it's sort of similar to the website, and that kind of a user understands that full journey.
Yeah, because you don't know where the user is going to come in, so it needs to be cohesive, and you need to kind of all the touch points, really look into all of them, and just make sure that you're saying the right things in those different points, so you can attract the most amount of audience. And I really think as well, in terms of like capturing attention, is all about as well being really sort of honest as well. And you just don't try too hard, and don't, you know, and offer value as well, like value in the sense not money, but sometimes it's just like advice.
That's
You know, you
it.
don't always need
Or
to come up.
entertainment.
Yeah, exactly, entertainment. You don't always need to come in and sell.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's about brand building, which is very
100%.
important, that you combine the both, you know, just brand building and tactical pieces.
That's it. I think one thing as well we're finding is not only understanding that kind of audience piece and having your creative relating to your audience, but also having your creative aligned with the objective. So exactly like you say, Belle, are we sort of reaching out? Is it an awareness? Is it a brand building piece? Or is it a sales tactic? Or is it a consideration where you want people to be entertained and come visit your maybe organic pages, for example? And each kind of stage of the funnel has a different purpose. And I guess your creative has to reflect that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when we talk about creative, I mean, people think like massive ads, lots of production, big cameras. Doesn't need to be like that. Doesn't need to be rubbish either, you know.
That's it.
Or
Low
not.
budget doesn't mean to say
Exactly.
it has to be
a little bit of both. You know, you have to definitely plan it and be strategic about it, and that takes time, and it takes sort of like exploration.
Yeah. And testing again, you know, comes back to testing.
Exactly, and testing and see what works, what doesn't work, because that's how you find out who's your audience as well. You know, you will know by their interactions with your post. Yeah,
Definitely. And I think, you know, when we talk about creative, I think, as we say, you know, low budget doesn't mean to say it has to be low quality. And I think it's so important that we have the kind of appropriate mediums as well. I think one thing that we kind of really consider is placements across Meta. For example, Meta is ever expanding its inventory and making sure that we're having brand safe placements as well at the moment. I think, you know, we don't want to expand too much where brands are going in unsafe territories, but also experimenting beyond just reels and stories as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well. Use the platform to the full extent. You know, reels, stories, posting on your timeline. You know, so there's a lot of things that you can do. You can actually as well do behind the scenes or, you know, outtakes, and people love that as well. And it's just an easy thing to do that can, you know, showcase your personality as a brand and as a product as well. So.
I think when, you know, we're seeing more AI creatives and AI generated content, I think brand authenticity and an authentic tone of voice is becoming ever more important.
I think so.
Building that trust with your kind of users and your audiences, I think is so important that, you know, to break through and kind of have that tone of voice.
Yeah, I just think like, you know, with this push of like AI, the humanity behind your brand is going to be more and more a value that people are going to look for, you know, because we're going to crave humanity if everything is AI, you know. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but with how things are going, you know, people want to see human interactions and empathy and all that stuff. And you can provide that as a brand.
Yeah.
Too.
And ultimately, you know, the more connection that you have, the more authentic your voice is, the higher your engagement rates, and the more you're going to win in the auctions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Hi again, mate.
Hello.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, covered absolutely loads, I think, today because we've been chatting. Loads of really exciting stuff for 2026, and I think that there's so much opportunity. It's almost, you feel like spoiled for choice. But I think that one of the important things to prioritizing what you go after and keeping the momentum up is going to be the measures of success. So how do you prove that it's working? What parts of it are working? How do you know sort of which levers to push and to pull?
I think measuring success is so critical, right? You can have the best creative idea in the world, and if the graphs aren't going up and right, then people aren't happy. I think from an organic social perspective, you've got to start with the foundations of, is the content resonating? And in 2026, that means really digging into the meaningful metrics. So it's not just looking at likes, comments, shares, things that are really kind of easy to farm. It's about thinking about view through rate, view to completion. It's about increasingly thinking about private social sharing as much as public social sharing, right? It's about how are people realistically sticking with this content and wanting to pass it on.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I think that, you know, there's that element of measuring sort of social engagement in the right way where what you're saying makes so much sense. I think there's so many surface level sort of vanity metrics that fly around in the world of social. I think the other thing that's an interesting challenge, if you like, but can play a really, really exciting role in growing a brand if you get it right, is how you tie organic, paid, social back to
Absolutely.
a single sort
Fundamental.
of center of truth, and also how you get it sort of in a way that is lined up with all of your media and marketing efforts. And we're lucky because we sit in a building with data scientists who can help us to do that.
Yep.
But it's not always straightforward, and I think that the answer's not always the same for every brand. But I think in 2026, making the most of all of the opportunities spoken about today will depend on getting the measurement right.
Yeah, absolutely.